So, in Japan, a really fascinating story is unfolding. It's this collision of demographics, technology, and, well, culture. You see, the country's society is aging incredibly fast, and they're turning to AI to solve one of their absolute biggest challenges. Who is going to care for the elderly? So, yeah, let's dive right in.
I mean, it's a question that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, right? But for Japan, this is becoming a very urgent reality. This isn't just some abstract idea. It's a real social issue that makes you stop and think, what does care even mean? And the reason it's so incredibly urgent, it all boils down to one staggering number. 377,000. Yeah, you heard that right. That's the projected shortage of caregivers in Japan by next year. We're talking about an entire industry that's already buckling under the strain of not having enough people. And this problem? It's not getting smaller. It's just growing.
All right, so let's really get into this crisis. It's basically a perfect storm. You've got this super aging population on one hand and a declining birth rate on the other. It's creating a demographic situation that's, well, it's unlike almost anywhere else on the planet.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. By 2040, so in just about 15 years, over a third of the entire population of Japan will be 65 or older. This isn't some far-off distant future we're talking about. It's right around the corner. And a shift like that, well, it puts incredible pressure on everything, from Social Security to, you guessed it, the elder care system.
So, how does culture play into all of this? Well, it's actually a huge part of the story. Research shows this really interesting divide. It turns out that people in the Asia-Pacific region are generally way more optimistic about AI. And that includes Japan, where most people see AI as a good thing, which is pretty different from what you see in Europe or North America. And that cultural mindset really helps explain why Japan is jumping in headfirst to pioneer these robotic solutions.
Okay, so you've got this massive caregiver shortage on one side and a pretty tech-positive culture on the other. So what does Japan do? It bets big. We're talking about the government and private companies pouring billions and billions of yen into creating the next generation of care technology. And the vision, the dream here is really compelling. The idea is that AI could take over all the tedious but super important stuff. Think about it, reducing all that paperwork, which can eat up a quarter of a caregiver's day. Or using AI to spot little health trends that a busy human might totally overlook. It's really about giving people superpowers, augmenting what they can do, not just replacing them. And look, this isn't just talk. This is happening right now. You've got companies using AI-powered sensors in beds to track sleep quality, so a caregiver doesn't even have to walk into the room. And then there's this incredible robot being tested, a 330-pound humanoid bot built to do the really heavy lifting, like moving a patient to prevent bed sores. The tech is moving fast.
But here's where it gets complicated. Technology is only half the story. Because when these amazing robots leave the sterile lab and enter a real, messy human care home, they run smack into the deeply human and often invisible parts of what it means to care for someone.
There's this one story from an anthropologist that just captures it perfectly. A facility brought in this robotic lifting machine, to help caregivers and prevent back injuries. But he found that a lot of the caregivers just rejected it. They felt it was disrespectful, that it moved people around like a piece of luggage. They wanted to care with their own hands. And that tells you everything, doesn't it? For them, care is so much more than just a list of tasks. And this really gets to the core of the tension here. On one side, you have the engineers. They tend to see this as a problem of human-robot interaction, or HRI. It's all about tasks, efficiency, automation. But on the other side, you have the caregivers. For them, it's about human-human interaction, HHI. It's all about empathy, relationships, and that human connection. There's this really important Japanese cultural concept called yoriso. It's this idea of snuggling up to someone, this physical and emotional closeness, just being truly present with a person. And for a lot of caregivers, that is the job. That's the whole point. And a machine, no matter how amazing it is, can create distance right where that closeness is needed most. And it goes even deeper when you start to pull apart any simple task. What you see on the surface is always being shaped by these invisible forces underneath. So, for example, the visible task is following the facility's rules. But the invisible part is trying to navigate all the complicated insurance policies. Or the visible task is helping someone bathe. But the invisible part is this cultural belief that personal, hands-on care is just better. And even giving medication. It's driven by that invisible gut feeling that our own eyes are more trustworthy than a sensor.
Okay, so with all of this complexity swirling around, how is Japan actually trying to manage this transition? Well, it turns out their approach to regulation is just as unique as their demographic problem. So instead of creating these really rigid, top-down laws, Japan is trying something called agile governance. And the name says it all, right? The whole idea is to be flexible, to adapt as the tech changes, and to get everyone in the same room, the developers, the users, the regulators, and keep them talking. And this soft law approach is completely different from what you see in, say, the European Union with their hard law model. The EU is all about preventing harm, so they use legally binding rules. But Japan, they're focused on promoting innovation, so they use these non-binding guidelines. They're basically trusting companies to do the right thing and adopt the best practices on their own. And this whole style of governing, it circles right back to that cultural optimism we talked about earlier. There just isn't the same level of public anxiety in Japan about, AI taking over the world. The focus is much more on how can we harness this for good rather than how do we regulate this out of fear. So what does all this mean for the rest of us? I mean, the whole world is getting older. What can we learn from Japan's huge and frankly very complicated experiment?
Well, first off, public opinion is never black and white. It's not just pro-AI or anti-AI. When you look at the surveys, sure, you see a lot of anticipation and curiosity. But there's also a good deal of unease and doubt, especially among the older generations. And that mix of excitement and worry, that's something every country is going to have to deal with.
And I think the lessons here are pretty profound. Maybe the best role for AI isn't out on the front lines at all, but backstage. Handling the paperwork, crunching the data, doing all the stuff that frees up the human caregivers to have more time for that yori so. It makes you ask a much bigger question, doesn't it? Is the real goal here just to fill a labor gap, or is it to build a better, more human way of caring for people? It really seems like the answer is that the technology has to serve the human relationship, not try to replace it.
Because at the end of the day, Japan's experience is showing us that the answer isn't as simple as robots. It's this messy, complicated negotiation between efficiency and empathy, between automation and human touch. And as our technology and our humanity continue to merge, it leaves us with a pretty big question. Who will we trust to care for us? It's something every single society is going to have to figure out for itself.